monster.
Hey guys, Clone Guy here, and another 2 weeks have gone by. Yes, we have changes again to certain Tier 10 vehicles, which I'm kind of liking. I'm liking these. But before we delve into these, let's talk about this week first, June 1st through June 7th. And this channel's I'm trying to turn over a new leaf on this channel. I want this place to be, well, this is how it should have been all along. This is a place people come to learn, to get excited, to be happy. And that's what we're going to make this channel now, okay? That's what this channel is going to be all about. Alright, enjoyment for all. But let's see, Monday Madness, earn sometimes 2 silver boosts. Earn up to 5 of them by winning and surviving. So you can get some of those. Overlord, earn up the British, Tier 8 British Diamondback, or the Turtle Mark 1 Tank Destroyer will be available. And for those of you who are wondering what that is, I'll put it on screen right now. Here it is. Don't know what they're going to do to it. Probably going to nerf its DPM and maybe nerf its armor a little bit. That's usually what they do. But keep in mind, this Tank Destroyer does not have very much penetration on its standard or its premium rounds for a Tier 8 Tank Destroyer. So hopefully they don't touch its DPM too much, because that's kind of what keeps this tank going. So there's that. You'll have 2 weeks to get that. Weekend of ×3 next weekend, starting on the 5th. ×3 XP. So go ahead and get your triples if you're grinding for mercenary tanks, stuff like that. This is a great time to do that. Long haul, same as always, 75 wins, you get a random chest. And deals of the week, it didn't tell us the prices for them, which is quite interesting. But it's going to be the Tiger 131 and the Scourge Corvettes Heavy, so keep that in mind as well. So that's cool. We also have special tank bundles and emblems to commemorate D-Day and the addition of the Barracuda and Meal 1951 to the premium tech tree. So if you want to get that, I know somebody was asking me about that. Where is that? How can I buy it? Well, there it is if you want to buy it. And you want to support wargaming, of course. That is completely up to you. But let's get into these changes now. Let's start with the Object 268 version 4. This is good. This is good what we're going to be looking at here. And I've already read this, and it already tells me yet again that wargaming doesn't seem to play their own game or understand how it works. Because yet again, it's they're like, oh well, you know, according to these numbers, it's doing really, really, really well. Yeah, but have you noticed the fact that, you know, it's only been played 3,000 times in the last month? So, you know, they need 5,000 games to get good accurate numbers, they said. And so for a tank to only be played 3,000 times in a month is pretty abysmal. So, anyway, let's see. Summary. Things that stand out the most on this tank. This tank has a win rate of over 50%. Well, it's not played much, so when a good player picks it up, which I know Rage Adrenaline plays this thing all the time, and he's a great player, 60% recents. When a tank's not played much, and a good player picks it up, they're going to affect the win rate a whole lot. Plus, a lot of new players and players who aren't very good are not going to be grinding this line, as it's a terrible line to grind. The Tier 8 is not very good. Tier 7 is decent, but it's hard to master. They're good if you're good players. The Tier 9 is really bad, unless, yet again, you know how to play it. And so all these tanks are really bad leading up to this tank, unless you know how to play them. So it's going to deter bad players. So, of course, I feel like people who are playing these tanks already have a plus 50% win rate. So let's take a look. This tank blocks a lot of damage for a TD at its tier. Well, yes, it does just have armor, and that's about it. This tank doesn't move as much as most other TDs at its tier. That's because it's so slow, and it's so bad. So, based on this, we're going to do the following. Change the 300mm to 260. Decrease the effective thickness from 340 to 294. Alright, so that's the front lower plate, I'm guessing they mean. This is still more armor than armored TDs, so this reduction is in line with other tanks. And they're going to increase the maximum speed from 26 to 40. That's huge. That's what this tank needed. It's not going to go 55 like it does, or 50 I think it is, like on PC. But 40 is still going to allow it to actually get places. And the reverse speed from 8 to 18. Now this thing had 23 reverse speed on PC, and then I think they nerfed it to 18, or they nerfed it to 20. So to nerf it from 23 to 8 here on console is a ridiculous nerf. So that's nice that they've actually brought that back up. So that's good. Still won't have great power to weight, so you might not be able to get up to speed that well. But then they just talk about the win rate and how this tank's win rate is a little bit higher than everything else, and how it's moving from spawn rate is even lower. Look at the SPGs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is probably the bat chat already. And then this thing right here, this is probably the Stridsvong. It drops below that sometimes. So it's one of the most stationary tank destroyers and moves only slightly more than some SPGs. So this one has to be the bat chat. So that's ridiculous. And it blocks a lot of damage. Only 2 heavy tanks are higher, it says. But you know, these ones are also higher sometimes. I'm gonna guess the heavy tanks maybe 279E or the Panzer 7. That thing is always blocking damage. But I don't know, maybe the mouse? I doubt the mouse. So that's interesting. So yes, they're gonna have to wait until this thing has 5,000 battles, which may take 2 months before they can let us know how it's been doing, because as I said, it's barely played. And yeah, tanks that aren't played much are the ones that should be buffed, in my opinion. In my opinion, I think there needs to be more diversity in this game to help it survive a little bit more. But now the Death Star. And some of you already know what has happened to this. I'm sure you've read it already, and you're going to be fuming. But I want you... Well, let's get into what they do, and then we'll talk about it, okay? So, it's all about the Hesh. Yes, it is. My name is Jeff Gregg. Hello, Jeff Gregg. I'm lead designer. Yes, you are. So, the goal is to highlight specific tanks. Yes, okay, we know this. Moving on. FE215B, 183. Summary, whatever you want to say. We see that players of all skill levels are attracted to this tank. Yes, it's the most played tier 10 on the PlayStation 4. And it's the second most played tier 10 on all consoles. It's also second most played on the Xbox, so, yep. Okay, so we see that players of all skill levels are attracted to this tank, use it frequently, and are willing to send expensive shells downrange to help propel their team to victory. Much more so than any other tank at this tier. We see that it hits like a demon, but that fact doesn't mean it lives longer, survives more often, or wins more often. Based on this, we plan to do the following. Reduce the Hesh damage from 1750 to 1450. And already you're like, what? No, what am I going to do with my Death Star anymore? I can't one-shot tier 10s anymore. Yes, this is true, but we're not done. Reduce the Hesh penetration from 270 to 240, and now you're really fuming. Now you're like, what on earth is going on here? How could they do this to me? Reduce the HE, of course, the same thing, and increase ammo count from 12 to 20. So right now, Death Star drivers are getting one good thing out of this, and that's more ammo. But please, let me just explain something to you, Death Star drivers. I love pulling out the FE4005. Okay, I think it's hilarious one-shotting people. It really, really is. But it's not fun being the one getting one-shotted. It really isn't. And that's what they've decided to do. They've decided to make it more fun for everyone. It's gonna hurt you a little bit in your Death Star, but everyone else is going to have a little bit more fun. And I do like that approach. And I am a little bit sad that my Death Star won't be one-shotting people very much anymore, if at all. Some tier 8s you can do it if you roll high enough. But I want you to move on from this. Realize, okay, now there's more things you can do with the tank. Now you have 20 shells. You can fire AP now and Hesh. And you don't have to just sling Hesh. Now you have to decide, okay, is now the time for an AP shell, or is now the time to risk it with a Hesh shell? Right, so you have to think more now. And maybe this will allow you to get into other tanks that perhaps you didn't realize you would love, like maybe Soviet mediums. Maybe you haven't played those yet. Something like that. So this will add, yet again, more diversity into the game, because now you're not just getting hit by Hesh, and you're not just shooting Hesh. Now you can shoot AP as well, which will be just as viable. The AP is not changing. For those of you who play Death Stars and already only shoot AP, this is nothing but a buff for you, as now you have 20 shells. This will also affect the FE4005. Anyway, let's look at this popularity and win rate. So this is funny to me, because this line is exactly the same. It's talking about the player win rate and the tank's win rate, and look at the lines. It's exactly the same. But the reason this is because this tank is so popular that when there is one tank on one team, there's oftentimes another tank on the other team. The more a tank is played, the more likely it has to face off against itself. And when that happens, guess what? One of them will win, one of them will lose. So the more a tank is played, the more likely it will lean towards 50%, no matter how strong the tank is. Which is why like the 279E here on console isn't doing as well as it is on PC, because more people have it, and because more people have it, they have to fight each other more, and yet again that means one of them will win, one of them will lose. And that's how it is with the Death Star. It's the second most played tank, so one of them wins, one of them loses. And that's why the 268 version 4 has a higher win rate, over 50%, because it doesn't have to face off against other 268 version 4s. So it doesn't have to outperform any of those. So that's something you have to keep in mind. And that's, as you see, all these lines, they're all the same everywhere. But this stat is pretty interesting. How often is an AP shell fired? An AP shell is fired 25% of the time. An HE shell is fired 6% of the time. And the HESH shell is fired 69% of the time. So, which makes sense, and I absolutely agree. You should fire HESH in this tank. And for those 25% of you who fire AP, like I said, this is going to be a buff for you. And this stat is also quite interesting. Where'd they put it? Dun, dun, dun. They have it around here somewhere. They mentioned the percentage people shoot. Oh, here it is. It was right here. The average percent of premium shells fired per tier 10 battle is 18%. 18% of shells fired at tier 10 are premium shells. That's a high number. That's almost 20%. That's almost 1 out of 5 shots. So that's quite interesting, right there, indeed. So keep that in mind. And it is probably mostly Super Conquerors, Death Stars, and artillery. It seems like artillery is almost always shooting Super HE. But why wouldn't you? Those are all really pay-to-win rounds, right? So yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, so that's what's going on tomorrow. We'll be, of course, streaming this. After 5,000 battles, we'll have another talk about the tank. That should be quick. They should be able to, get that out in 2 weeks, or even a month, depending how long it takes them to, process it and get this out. But I think this is, again, a good change, because it's going to make the game more diverse. People are going to be willing to play other tanks than the Death Star and the 4005. And like I said, that's good. More diversity is good. People are going to be willing to shoot AP out of the Death Star. People are going to be willing to take 50% AP, 50% HESH, and then decide what they need to fire. You won't be getting one shot anymore. You can still do a lot of damage in this tank, because 1450 is still insane. But no longer, if you are on the receiving end, will you get one-shotted. That's fantastic. You're still going to be crippled. Lose some crew members, lose some modules, have 500 health left. But you're still in the game. And so that's good. But that's this video. I hope you guys all enjoyed. If you did, slap that like button, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about these changes. And I know a lot of you guys will be fuming about the Death Star in the comments, but really think about it. Don't just fume. Think a little bit for yourself before you decide to fume. And then, once you're ready to, go ahead and fume in the comments. And that's going to be it. Make sure you go check out SpaceBANDIT Qual Mentality's YouTube's links in the description below. And I'll see you guys all later. Take care, everyone. And peace out.